is episode 2, Taking Risks.
On today's episode, we have Felix Tan with us. Felix Tan is the co-founder of Skilio. And over to you, Felix. A bit about yourself, please.
Hi everyone, thanks for having me. I'm Felix. I'm also besides just being the co-founder of Skilio, I'm also a final semester student in NUS. I'm doing majoring in global studies. And a little bit about Skilio. We are building an AI-powered digital soft skills portfolio for Gen Zs to basically be able to showcase and track their soft skills competencies. In a nutshell, it's a little bit like building LinkedIn for soft skills, but very much targeted at the new generation of young people that's coming out into the workforce. Yeah, so happy to be here, to talk about this topic.
Yeah, great to have you on, Felix. I kind of stumbled upon your startup a few months back, and I was just scrolling through LinkedIn. And the good thing about LinkedIn these days is that you do see posts that your friends liked and things like that, right? So when I saw one of the posts that Adnan had liked, and then I just went on to click into the website to look into it, and I got to say the platform is super slick and I think just going through the platform and what you guys are trying to do, it's super cool. Yeah, honestly,
Thank you.
that's the only word that comes to my mind. But yeah, I guess the first question would be we're trying to talk about what it is to take risks, right? And obviously, starting some sort of a venture like you did definitely does involve a lot of risk as well as a lot of calculated risks along the way. But before we jump into the word risk,
Yeah.
because the word risk is widely used, right? Like people use it in any context. For pretty much
Yeah.
anything you can say risk, risk, risk. I take risk. Do you take risk management, risk averse, and things like that. But before all of it, I guess we should ask what is stability, right? Stability would, in my opinion, would kind of be the contrasting word. So, what is like stability and being stable to you in any context?
Right. I think like what you said, right? The definition of both words like stability and risk differs for everybody, and by no means my definition is the one that can be applied to all the audience here that's listening in. But I think for me, stability is probably something that is being comfortable with where you are, being comfortable with what you're currently doing, and to me, I think stability is something. I wouldn't say it's a negative word, right? But it mainly just means that I'm not growing. It means that perhaps I'm not pushing the boundaries. But to some people, that may be okay, right? Especially at different stages of their life and and different phases of where they're currently at. But I think for me, stability means you probably found a certain set of rhythm in life, and and that kind of rhythm is something that you're comfortable with. I guess that will be my definition of what stability means to me.
Yeah. I mean, interestingly, I think what you mentioned was stability can also be looked at as stagnation to some people.
Hmm.
Like, I guess it depends on the
Depends.
perspective.
Depends on
And,
perspective. Yeah.
some people who have, so it's all about order and chaos, right? So some people prefer more chaos to them, like to some people, more uncertain career paths or uncertain scenarios are more stable because they're more comfortable in that.
Yeah. That.
So yeah, so it's more personal, I would say.
Yeah. And I think um stability, right? Although it could mean stagnation, I think, like Felix said, in certain scenarios, it is quite desirable as well, right? So, um, maybe in the context of say if you're a family, if you have a family and you're in a family kind of a surrounding, right?
Yeah.
You would want to have some sort of stability within your family, right? So you would want to have people close to you, around you, and things like that. So in that kind of a situation, maybe stability is a good thing, but
Well, you probably got there because you were looking for stability.
possible, yeah. But yeah, the word itself, I honestly, when people say, when people ask me, right, are you, do you look for stability? I kind of dislike the word as it is, because at least like off late, right? Like I feel there's been a change in perception of people. So maybe 10, 15 years back, or if you ask your parents or my parents, they would say that, the word stability is such a positive word. I'm, looking for stability in life and all that. But right now it's such an kind of uncool thing to say, right? If any of us go to our friends and say that, oh, I'm actually looking for a stable job, something 9 to 5 standard thing that pays me a set amount of money, and I would want to grow in a slow yet kind of guaranteed fashion. People just look at you. They're like, is this guy truly someone who's in this generation? Who's born in these times? Because right now, everything, pretty much, almost everything around you is chaotic to an extent.
Yeah, I guess a part
Yeah.
of it as well, right, is because of things that's happening around us, right? We are in an environment that are fast changing, and things are moving so quickly. And if we are so comfortable in the current set of rhythm, like what you said, right? For a lot of our parents, the generation that they come from, they strive to maybe be in one job for many years, right? And but with the current kind of condition and the situation in the economy and how things are changing, disruptions happening, we can't afford to have the mindset to be stable in one aspects or in one aspects of our life, right? And it becomes the fact that you have to be mindful that you're always be prepared for the next change, or be prepared for something that's going to come into maybe disrupt the status quo, right? So I guess maybe that's why there is the kind of like feeling or the vibe, right? That for people our generation, we can't really be stable. Yeah, but I guess again, it does apply for different aspects of your life, right? And it doesn't have to be like what I think what you were saying, like in family, right? You will definitely want to have a more stable kind of arrangement. But I guess it really differs from people to people.
Yeah. 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 I mean, even in family, some people don't want stability.
Really? Oh god. Yeah, but I
Yeah.
think personally, there are certain things and certain um aspects where I do look for stability even now.
Yeah.
Probably not so much in with regards to career and things like that, but yeah, I think with regards to family, that is like 100% for me. I need to have something that is stable. I need to at least try to find something that is stable. Yeah, because I don't know, call me old fashioned, but in certain aspects, I still can't give up that sense of looking. I try to find something that's stable, and definitely, all of us here getting to this point in our lives, we've already taken certain leaps of faith and certain risks, and we have tried to do things which probably not everybody else has been doing. Personally, the two of us are international students, right? So I would say choosing, taking the option to just make the leap of faith to move to a foreign country is okay. Might not be the most risky thing, but to an extent, it is a bit of a risk, because you never know what will happen, and you never know where you will end up in
I
the next
mean,
few years and things like
unless you're coming to a university and you check the rankings and you're pretty sure. So I don't think it's that much of a risk per se. I think
that.
it's you obviously selected NTU because you thought that it was the best you could do.
Yeah, that's true.
So yeah, I mean, I wouldn't look at it as much of a risk. I think sometimes people actually overplay the notion of risk and overplay things as risky, which are actually not that risky.
Mhm.
And as humans, our tendency is to avoid risk, right? Like to survive. The natural instinct is to avoid risk. Because in a fight, for example, in a boxing match or in any kind of professional fighting, the natural tendency is to run away. So to get in the ring and to fight someone is actually going against your natural tendencies.
Interesting. But again, that depends, right?
Yeah.
The common saying, just with the context that he gave of uh, during a fight, there's the whole two sides of it, which is fight or flight, right? So people do choose to get in there and still, see, okay, I'm put it all out in the ring, whatever happens, happens
Yeah.
kind of mentality, which is what people of late uh
Yeah.
leaning
Yeah.
towards.
Yeah.
May or may not be a good thing once again. But yeah, I
So I
guess we
think
need
that's
to.
how we can move on to the next sort of topic.
Yeah,
Yeah, because like you said, that people are increasingly finding stability in uncertainty almost. Like one of my friends always says that he wouldn't want to work at a place where he's not challenged. Like he wants to be challenged every day, right? So, and with you've also started Skilio, and you must have a vision in mind of the future you want to build, the future world that we want to live in. So there's this common expression of high risk, high reward, like sacrificing, to live in a society that you wish to build. So what is your thoughts? What are your thoughts on this high risk, high reward?
Yeah, I mean that's the basic economics term, right? Like, if you don't have high risk, the kind of rewards will always be subnormal, right? If you look at all the, like the charts of your stock exchange and all this kind of thing, uh, it's
the
a
stock
very
market
stand
only goes up.
yeah, it's a very standard kind of expression. Um, I guess in any how I see it is like in this whole debate around risk, around stability, it's always like a lever, right? And you have multiple controls that you can tune up or tune down. And in any decision that you make, the risk is not one dimensional, right? And the risk or stability kind of ratio is not one dimensional. So I think going back to the example that you have shared about job, right? Getting in a job that's challenging can be in the context of a startup, right,
Yeah,
where financial stability is not very high, but you get challenged a lot. Or it could be in in an MNC, right, or a big company, right, where you have financial stability, but maybe you get challenging jobs as well. And but I guess in that kind of scenario, right, it's really dependent on the individual. What do they value? What is the kind of things that they see as important, right? And then from there, then sort of contextualizing their scenario to what they are going into and making the decision based off the trade-offs. But I guess for people that maybe for me personally, right, going into Skilio was really more about, I guess, a personal mission, right, to sort of try to make sure that society, don't just judge people by their academic grades, but also judge people on a more well-rounded basis in terms of their non-academic qualities. And I guess that also personally stems from my own journey growing up, like how I wasn't, the most academically inclined students, but I was very lucky to be given opportunities to learn and grow in the non-academic aspects. And I guess, in that case, that was a very strong personal calling for me, right? And when I started Skilio when I was in year one in NUS, it was like a natural next step for me. And although there are a lot of sacrifices, like for example, I don't really have much social life, because I have to work and and all of those kind of things. But it's something that I'm comfortable to make that trade-off with. And maybe for someone else in the same situation, that whole equation might be different, right? So it is a very interesting and very tricky topic to talk about, because it really
yeah,
depends on everybody's situation.
Definitely. And one of the things that no matter the topic, right, that we try to not seek a conclusion, but try to find what the guest thinks about is with this whole notion of how passion affects that particular whatever you're talking. So in this context, it would be risk, right? So would you say that to be able to even make that leap of faith and decide to take a particular risk, you need to be passionate about the thing before you do that?
I for me personally, right, I
Yeah,
think
personally.
you should have passion in what you want to do. And because if the word passion it means, right, I think if I didn't remember wrongly, is to suffer, right? Is to suffer for what you like to do, right? And if you're not passionate about what you would like to do. For different people, it might be sustainability, it might be investment, it might be making money for all you know, right? If you're not willing to suffer for that, right, then it's going to be very sad, right? Because you are making all these sacrifices, you're making all these choices, but you're not enjoying what you like to do, or you're not comfortable with going through that pain, right? And I guess I always like to say that, especially in general, right, people of our age at this kind of early 20s of our life, don't play it safe, right? Because how many more early 20s do we have? We only have it once, and I think this is the best time for us to experiment, for us to try things, for us to take risks, right? Because when you then step into the workplace, I have many friends that eventually they decide to quit their MNC job and start their startup, mid-career when they are in their 30s. And I
Yeah.
always say I admire their decision, right? Because it's such a heavy responsibility, having to pay for rent, having to pay for their family, but they decide to take that leap of faith. Compared, and they always say to me, right, I wish I have done it earlier. I wish I've done it when I was in university. And that's something that, yeah, I would love to share with everybody listening in right now.
Yeah.
No,
And
I would say, I would say you should take the leap of faith even in your early 30s or 40s or 60s. You know,
yeah, that's true, but easier said, I guess.
one thing that I would kind of mention is this high risk, high reward notion, right? Even if startup success rate is really slim, right? As you know, Felix and
Mhm.
Deep. But still, I think you're already getting the reward of working on something that you're passionate and pursuing meaning in life. You can look at that as reward, even if your startup doesn't become a unicorn.
Yep.
Like you're already getting a lot of reward.
Yeah,
So yeah,
definitely.
yeah,
Yeah, I totally agree, and I think it really depends on how you view reward, right? Is it
Yeah,
monetary reward? Is it being able to know people in the network, right, or to expand your network? That's also a reward, right?
yeah.
Being able to pick up new skills, that's also a reward. So I guess it's also being putting the lens in perspective, right? What do you seek to get out of it? Right, and that I guess with the whole Maslow hierarchy of needs, that and depending on where you are in life, that kind of risk reward ratio is something that's different for everyone.
exactly. Yeah. And I guess another thing would be, right, with the whole, we just spoke about how passion is maybe, is, I wouldn't say it's the most important thing when you're making a choice of whether or not you want to take a risk, but it definitely plays a role. And like Felix said, for him personally, it definitely did
Yeah.
play a,
I mean, to me as well, I think that is the most important factor.
yeah. And I think when you're passionate, that's when the way you measure reward also
Yeah,
kind of changes.
yeah.
So it's no longer just about how your balance sheet is looking, or
Well, it's definitely not about that.
yeah. And I guess that would be to say to almost any startup founder, right? They
Yeah,
do start, at least most of them, or the ones that I know of. It's definitely due to something genuine, a genuine problem that they want to
yeah.
find a solution to, rather than thinking, oh, will I be profitable in 3 years or 4 years?
I don't think anyone thinks that, but you have to think that if you want to build a successful startup. So I guess eventually you get to that.
Eventually.
Yeah,
But do you think it's also possible to become passionate along the way? Say I'm working in that particular context, the friend of mine, as in the colleague of mine was a chemical engineer from NUS, if I'm not wrong. And he said, because the whole way the oil and gas industry is perceived is quite negative of late, right? People do think that they are causing more harm than good, which, okay, that's a separate topic that we probably should touch on later in another
yeah, yeah,
episode. But the whole, his whole view was that when I joined out of university and when I studied chemical engineering, um, I was quite passionate about being able to drive some sort of change or find something meaningful within that industry, because chemicals do, specific to chemicals, they do have create a lot of positive things, and there's a lot
Yeah.
of good that comes out of it. But then he said that, say 5 6 years after, I do feel, because when he got rotated to a business facing role or a front office role, uh, he kind of felt that he was losing some of the initial passion that he had. So do you think, if this situation, and this it is quite common, at least from like the so-called career professionals that I've heard of, they say that down along the line they do lose passion. Do you think this
Yeah.
is common, and if so, like, what how do people get around this, right? Because, okay, maybe with regards to a startup, if this was the case, actually that would be
The death of the
the
startup.
death of the startup, maybe.
If
But
you lose passion.
if you lose
Yeah.
passion, but it does happen, right? How do you
Yeah.
how do you work around it? What do you think, Felix?
Yeah, I think a lot of what passion comes from as well is it stems from purpose, right? What's your purpose in life? And a lot of us, me included, I wouldn't say that I have found my purpose in life, because it is a constant journey of self-discovery. And if you're not exploring, you wouldn't know what you like or what you don't like. Right. And I think for me, like, for example, I was exposed to the education industry when I was 17, right? When I was doing a lot of coaching and youth mentoring, and that got me interested in the space. And that got me passionate because I found deep purpose within the space of helping other younger students become better, or become just 1% better by the end of, my interaction with him or her. Right. And I guess in the example that you have just shared about, those seniors that you have that, got rotated and realized that they started to lose passion for what they do, a lot of times it's because of exploration. And it's normal that during this phase of exploring, and what you realize is that, oh, I didn't like this part of the job or this part of the industry. I don't like this kind of job function, or I don't like the whole general industry in general, right? Maybe I come in thinking that, oh, this is a sustainability role, I'm going to make change within the oil and gas industry. But to your horror, then you realize that, you're making more harm than good, right? And then that sort of conflicts with what you believe in, right? Conflicts with your purpose. And in that case, that sort of, have a dwindling effect on your passion for what you're doing as well. And I guess, as you go through a lot of these multiple roles and exploration, as you may start to realize that things start to change, right? And maybe your purpose starts to tweak a little, right? And all of these are internal as well as external. So things that affects you externally can change your purpose or change your direction in life. Things that happen internally as well can do that as well. So I guess, probably that's the phenomenon that you're describing, in my opinion.
Yeah, and I think it's not really a bad thing that you're losing passion for a particular, for something particular at some stage of life. It could just as well mean that you're becoming more passionate in something else, right?
Yeah.
And I think identifying that is important, and being okay with it is as
Yeah.
important.
Yeah. I think
Yeah,
one more thing that I wanted to touch on is, uncertainty. And, startups or any idea is basically a hypothesis. And we go out there to try to validate our hypotheses. So, how do you deal with uncertainty? Like, you don't know what is going to happen next, right? We're all trying to find out. So, how do you deal with uncertainty? And does it excite you? Or do you try to, like, let me try to validate as much as possible as
Eliminate
soon as,
the
yes,
uncertainty.
eliminate the uncertainty. Yeah.
yeah. Interesting question, right? When I look back at my own journey, what I realized is that uncertainty excites me, but not the consequences of it, right? So
Yeah.
when I'm uncertain, right, that excites me to want to do something about it. But the consequence of getting it wrong scares me, right? Because like, for example, right now in our startup, right, we have to raise money because we for example, we have mouths to feed, right? And
Yeah.
it's uncertain because I've never done it before, right? So I have to figure things out. I have to go and do that on my own, right? But the consequence of failing it is something that worries me. It's something that scares me, right? And I guess
Yeah.
that's the whole, in my opinion, that's the whole equation of uncertainty, right? And I guess, like in school, we are all taught that 1 + 1 is equals to 2, right? But a lot of times in the society that we are going into, right, the equation is blank plus blank equals to one, right? How do you, and there's multiple ways to solve a particular question or derive at an answer, right? And I think we must then be comfortable with the idea that, and it's not just in startups, right? Even in the kind of, even in whatever job that you do in the future, we must be uncomfortable with uncertainty and having the methodology to say, hey, maybe I'll try something like that, and test it, and like what Anand said, right? Validate it, right? To see whether you're on the right track, right? And then slowly finding your way to the right answer in the most maybe efficient manner or possible, depending on the parameters that you're given. And yeah, I guess that's how I would put my relationship with uncertainty.
I think that's the most amazing thing about startups. I think is that there are so many variables that, like Steve Jobs said, that you take this whole machine of variables and put it into this team of people who then, through years, months and years of ideation, talking and validating everything, such a complex process to make one product. And I think that is why it's so much fun and exciting as well.
Yeah, yeah. And the thrill of not knowing is definitely there to an extent. But like Felix said, and this is a concern, right? Like you are quite people do want to have a thrill in not knowing certain things, but dealing with the consequences of it when it goes wrong is a whole different thing. And I guess you need to um be of the mindset that no matter what happens, I'm going to be accountable for what it is, because you know um, be it a startup or anything else, it is kind of, like you said, blank plus blank equal to one, but you're the one who's figuring out what is fitting within the blanks, right? So
Yeah.
if it doesn't work out the way it should, or you wanted it to, the most important thing would be to take accountability for it, and not let that reduce your risk appetite or anything like that moving forward, right? Because the next time I would say the worst thing, or maybe one of the worst things that you could do, is to be that, I learned from this experience, so moving forward I will be more cautious, and I won't really, it's
Yeah.
it's the whole thing that, I have one foot out the door. So if you kind of switch to that kind of a mentality where you keep trying to build a lot of safety nets, and blank plus blank equal to one, but I will figure out a lot of things that, I will do in case it goes wrong.
I agree to a certain extent, but from every rejection, let's call it rejection or failure, I think you have to learn.
Mm.
And yeah, because it's a game of chess almost. So with every failed move, the next time you're in a similar situation, you have to realize what went wrong the last time.
Yeah.
Yeah. So
So
yeah.
the whole
And
question, I guess, here is: does that mean that you would be more cautious, or more, I will try to do the safer move in that situation, or would you still strive, or at least try? I think, it's only human that when you learn from mistakes, and especially if the mistakes have been painful, you to an extent wouldn't really, you won't really throw yourself into a similar situation again, right? Uh,
mhm.
but where does that trade off come about?
Yeah, I think I totally agree, right? That when you do something that you're unfamiliar with, you will start to basically have a understanding of what worked and what didn't, right? And I think those are valuable lessons. And I think it is a fine line between, after knowing this or after you fail, right? You start to become more maybe risk averse, right? And not do it anymore. Or it could be the other way around, where now that you know what doesn't work, when you do when you embark on the next opportunity or the next thing a set of things that you're doing, now you know what not to do, and you are then able to apply what works in the next venture. I think that's why for a lot of serial entrepreneurs, right, when they started their first venture and maybe it is not successful, the next time around when they do it again, venture capitalists tends to back those founders because they now know what doesn't work, right? And they now know the shortcut I wouldn't say shortcut, but maybe the shortcut to success, in the sense that
Yeah.
they now know how to actually implement something that in a more successful manner. And I guess, it's not just about knowing what to do, right? But it's also about the mental resilience that you are built into when you go through those failures, when you go through those hardships, and that brings you and keeps you grounded in the work that you do. And I do agree, right, that a lot of us, some of us might fall into the trap of, now trying to play a bit safer because of the kind of risk and the learnings from the failure, right? But I don't think that is necessarily a bad thing, right? It is good in certain circumstances, right? And that could be something it is valuable as well in different scenarios.
Yeah, like don't keep asking her out, man.
But I think at this age, you can afford to. Okay, maybe not in that context, but you can. What is the worst thing that could happen? Is what you should.
Lawsuit.
Okay, no, no. But when I say, in from the point, from the angle that, um at this age, when you're trying something that is potentially risky, I do. Okay, so personally, I do try to find certain like safety nets, right? So if I'm trying to do something that's risky or some venture into something unknown, I do see before I start. I see, what's the worst thing that could go wrong. And okay, obviously, I'm not able. I won't be, or I definitely can't predict exactly what's going to go wrong. But
But what's the worst that can
what's
happen?
the worst that can happen? And in a way, preparing yourself to be okay with it if it does happen, would
Yeah.
that, yeah, I feel personally it has helped me to an extent. So in that way, when it not when I'm it's not like I'm expecting it to happen or go wrong, right? But if it does, touch wood, happen that way, I'm okay with it.
Well, I expect things to go wrong.
Oh, you do?
So yeah, like I think the chance of succeeding
Is slim
is
on.
low
Yeah.
in most things, unless it's like a test or an exam. But when the chance of succeeding is low, then my peace of mind shouldn't rely on the success.
Uh-huh.
So I would rather be like, even if I'm unsuccessful, am I still happy in doing this? Then yeah, then I would try to pursue that. Even if I'm unsuccessful, would I still not regret, you know?
Yeah, I totally agree, right? I think it's okay to have safety nets, and it doesn't mean that it is an all out. If I'm going to take a risk on something, I have no backup plans at all. I
Yeah.
think that's very foolish.
Yeah, that's like borderline delusional, right? Because okay, you could be the most daring person. You can be, you could be doing something like skydiving, but you do know that there's a safety net, there's a backup chute if your main chute doesn't pull, if it doesn't work, right? And if you don't know that it exists and you just go into it, okay. Honestly, if I do find that some kind of a person who's like that, hats off to them.
You
But
know what? I think that's a false equivalency. Skydiving, if something goes wrong, you'll probably lose your life. If if you're out of a job, that's not the end of the world.
that's true.
So I think people tend to overplay their fears. Like I'm not sure about this, but I think the fear places in the brain operate similarly. So when we're afraid of losing our job, like these kind of things, they're not the end of the world, right?
Yeah, definitely.
And we tend to think that that's like dying, but it's actually not. You will find another job,
Yeah, that's true.
and you won't starve,
Yeah, yeah,
most probably.
yeah, and now that you did touch on parents and people around you, I you, I think whenever, no matter the topic, right? As much as we try to not be affected by our surroundings and what others think of us, it does. It definitely does to an extent. Play a role, and it does
Yeah.
impact you in a way, right? Impact your decisions, impact your choices to an extent. But I guess the whole question is how much you let in the opinion of others and the criticism of others and
Yeah.
what others think and what others think you should do.
Yeah.
So
I mean, have you had criticism like with Skilio, maybe in the beginning,
People around
someone,
you.
yeah, someone you pitched to, or anyone who has criticized you?
Yeah,
How did you?
every other day. Well, I mean, it is inevitable, right? I think not just in the startup space, but in anything that we do, we do always, there will be naysayers, there will be, people that, give you constructive criticism, right? And I guess, like in my journey, I have many of a fair share of those things, right? Whether is it, from a client, saying that, hey, you guys are kids, are you sure you're doing, what you do? Right? Or even from speaking to stakeholders, investors, and all that. And I guess really at the end of the day, how do you take in and filter those criticism? I think that's the important thing, right? And I think in any feedback, right? Whether is it a straight out blast in your face to say, hey, this, you shouldn't be doing all that, you suck and all that, right? Or is it a constructive one where they give you pointers to improve on any of such comments? I feel there are always key learning lessons from it, right? Well, especially for those that's more emotionally charged, you tend to get a little bit um, upset about it. But I guess once you start detaching the emotions from it, there are a lot of key learning points. I remember there was one time um, I was speaking to one of an investor, right? And the investor told me, let you be the last student entrepreneur I will speak to, right? So well, that was super harsh, right? I really felt like a dagger straight through my heart. But I guess that investor also did gave like their comments on why they thought it in such a way, right? And to me, I agree with some things, I don't agree with some, right? And I'm okay with that, and I just take the good learning points from it, and and go on from there, right? And yeah, you will get hurt, definitely. And I guess it is then being mature enough to then step away and take away the emotions, and analyze it logically and rationally, and see how you can learn and grow from that.
Yeah. You also spoke about, like you just mentioned it, I think, like not having a social life was one of the sacrifices that you've had to make for Skillio. So, was that tough? And, like just standing out from, from your peers and just not being, sort of normal.
Yeah, and I think it would be safe to say, or at least from my point of view, that um, in terms of standing out, you definitely didn't go through the typical university student life, right? Which is um, study, go out with friends, do whatever, work hard, party harder, kind of an attitude.
Yeah.
How much did that um, I I wouldn't say affect you, but how much did that help in shaping the way things are now?
Yeah, so I guess because I started this with my co-founders when we are in university, and I guess one of the thing about doing something from scratch is that you have to put in a lot of time and a lot of effort and commitment into it, right? So and a natural part of that is that we only have 24 hours of a day, right? And so certain things have to be to go, right? And it's not maybe just about social life; it's also about academics, right? Not being able to maybe attend classes, and then and all those things. And I guess all of these things taught me to be more resourceful, right? Taught me to really know that there is no fixed answer in life, right? I basically figure out what is the minimal effort that I need to do to get a B minus or B plus for my grades while attending the least number of lectures. I mean, not trying to advocate for that, right? But you get what I'm trying to say, right?
Yeah.
Yeah.
That you find ways to get around things. And I think when I shared about not having a social life, I'm not saying that entirely no social life at all. But I guess then prioritizing what kind of relationships I want to build, and what kind of when do I want to go for those things, right? And well, you then pissed off some people, and then and you make some group of good friends. But I think at the end of it, you as an individual has to be um, comfortable with the trade-off, right? And then from there, that's where you decide to say, hey, okay, this is the right amount of trade-off I make. Even in my academics, right, I'm okay with a B plus, right? But I can put the rest of my time to building my own company, right? So then you have to be comfortable with the choices that you make.
Exactly. And I think one thing that I would want to get your thoughts on, or your feelings on, is how much do you think, say, the support, or maybe the lack of it, or either way, of people around you, so your, say, your close friends and your family, kind of impact or help you along the way in the way that you chose to do things, right? And this
Yeah,
is coming from the whole side that uh, parents do want their children to be successful. They definitely, I think, every parent would want their child to be successful, right?
Yeah, Asian parents.
Asian parents specifically. But when my parents do think in this way, but when they see me doing something that is, taking the path that has not been taken by a lot of people, they do get a bit worried, right? And they definitely have been times where my parents have questioned me, and that has made me question myself as well. To,
Yeah.
okay, it's kind of like, those reality checks to see whether or not what you're doing is still really what you want to do. Have there been moments like that, and how is the support of your parents and your siblings or your peers have
yeah.
been about?
Yeah, so I guess that's very important, right? I think for any venture, right, especially for startup founders, the ecosystem of support is so important, right? Because you're not on this journey alone. So whether is it your co-founders, your team members, your parents, mentors, they are so crucial, right? Because they help you to, they see you through the happy times as well as the really bad ones. And I guess for me, I have been pretty blessed in the sense that I had good support, from people that are vested in what we do, and really, helping us to reach the next stage of our journey. But of course, you also do have, moments where, the support may not be the most ideal, right? Or there are doubts along the way, right? So like talk about parents, right? So my parents are pretty okay with me doing it, right? But the baseline was that I had to graduate with at least a degree. So dropping out of school is a no question. Is a no from my parents, right? But they gave me the parameters to say, hey, as long as you don't fail in your classes, as long as you don't do anything illegal. They are okay with me, doing what I want. And of course, then comes the topic of doing this full time after school. Can I get enough
Yeah,
money to survive in the future? That is also an ongoing conversation, right? And
right.
and then I have to then prove to them that, oh, with these mini successes that we have, this is what I project for myself, and this is how I intend to do my finances and all that kind of thing. So it becomes like I wouldn't say that they do not support you, right? I think it is it's really out of their care and their love to really want you to make sure that you're not getting yourself into something that you eventually you regret and things like that, right? But at the same time, I feel that it's also up to your own personal autonomy, right? To have that kind of thinking, to know what works best and what doesn't, right? And then from there, making plans to make sure that you maybe as much as you can, like what I said, build safety nets around things that may
Yeah.
not work, right? And then allow you to pursue what you want eventually.
Yeah.
Right. But have they ever hinted or kind of asked you to look for, say, another, maybe a full-time job as an
Or
option,
a
or
backup.
yeah, backup. Oh, I love this word, when people say backup, then I'm like, backup. No, but have they, because you are close to graduating, right? And
Yeah.
has there been a point where they maybe hinted or suggested that you should probably pursue a full-time job and have this as kind of a side thing? Because that does, it is pretty common, right? Especially if they don't see, or if they aren't as faithful in the whatever you're trying to pursue. Which I guess in your case, from what you said, they are quite faith. They do have faith, right? But
Yeah.
has there been such an instance? And if so, how did you convince them or how did you deal with it? Because I think to a lot of the people listening as well, right? People around us and our friends and people we know and people our age who are watching this show, definitely trying things. And I guess the main question would be, how do I not disappoint my parents, and how do I also fulfill their whatever basic expectations that they have while doing whatever I want to do. And it is quite important, right? We can't just choose to neglect, or we can't really be like, oh, this is what I have chosen and this is what I want to do. And
Yeah,
you
yeah.
should support me wholeheartedly because, yeah. So has there
Yeah,
been such an instance, and how did you deal with
yeah.
it?
I mean, in the past few months, we have been low key dropping hints.
Oh my God.
Right, but I guess like um like whenever they say those things, right, what I try to do is to get down to the reason why, right? So when I think when your parents ask you to get a full-time job and things like that, I think it is born out of the reason for making sure that you have financial stability. And then the question I ask myself is, if I want to continue doing what I do, how else can I build financial stability, right? While doing what I do. So that could be, doing that, doing maybe Skilio as a part-time thing and doing something else as maybe as a freelancer, right? Or, it could be doing Skilio full-time and then maybe, finding another income stream somewhere else, right? Whether is it through investing or whatsoever. So then me being having that kind of thinking allows me to then present this as a proposal to my parents. I say, hey, I want to continue doing Skilio, and this is how I know that you're worried about my finances. This is how I intend to, maybe bolster my pay or whatsoever, or my financial stability with these other methods. And it goes back to the same, question again earlier, right? Where you're talking about that it's no longer 1+1=2, right? It is
Yeah.
blank plus blank equals to 1. And then how do you then propose different ways to get to the same outcome that maybe your parents want for you, right? So in this case, full-time job, unless it is maybe working for our parents, right? But most of the time it's because of financial stability, right? Then
Yeah.
in that case, how do you present the case or the argument that you are still able to be financially sustainable while doing what you like to do, right? And if I can then make the argument, then that's something that I think they would most likely accept.
It's like pitching to
It
parents
is.
instead of investors.
Which is
Yeah,
equally important as well, yeah.
yeah, yeah.
Mm.
Like, what are the so that's the thing, right? Like, what have you done, and what is the reason why I believe that you will be successful?
Right,
It's pretty much the same thing. Yeah,
for sure. And I guess the last kind of question that we would want to ask you.
yeah. So, what advice would you give your younger self about career choices?
Yeah. Yeah, I guess for me it is more about don't play it safe. I feel that even for me, I started when I was 21. I feel that I could have started earlier,
Yeah,
right? And I think that also partially, at least for Singaporeans, right? It is a result of our education system, right? We were brought through this formal schooling period where for almost close to 16 years of 18 years of our life, we are going through the same set of path that everybody have went through, right? And it's mandated, and everything is preordained, right? But what I felt, when I jump on this journey of starting my own stuff and things like that, was that I learned so much in these 2 years compared to all the years of my life in school. And
yeah,
I just wish that I could have known this earlier, and just start different things, right? And it doesn't have to be a startup. It could be starting a youth organization, a ground up initiative, anything, right? And I think that would have really
yeah,
made me grow as a person, and like you guys starting this podcast, right? It will really help you grow as a person.
yeah.
And I guess that's my advice to my younger self, right? Don't play it safe, just really take risks and try things.
Just start.
Just
Just start.
yeah,
Yes.
yeah, and exactly. I think this is quite common with the whole Asian kind of education system in general, right?
Oh
Because
yeah, definitely.
the two of us also have been through a quite similar experience in a way that you're kind of shown a narrower path
Like, I
most of your
wanted to
child.
do psychology.
Okay.
and I'm studying mechanical engineering.
So that itself is kind of playing it safe in a way,
I
is
didn't
it?
play it safe. The person who pays the tuition fees just
Yeah, but
yeah,
that definitely is
yeah.
something that I hope, at least my kids, when they grow up, they do have a broader view and more choice
So you
with.
want to force it on them?
Oh my god. No, not really, but yeah.
Yeah,
Definitely having the ability to see more during your early days of schooling, having
yeah,
that kind of choice and the initial push, which I guess
yeah.
it's partly on our parents as well as on educators in general, right? Is quite important.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I think that's the concluding words from this episode.
Yep.
Just start.
Just that.
Yeah,
Thanks a lot, Felix, for
yeah.
taking the time, and it was a pleasure